say Senator Curtis is a good friend to the clean energy movement would be a vast understatement. During his time in the House of Representatives, Senator Curtis established the Conservative Climate Caucus, which created an avenue for his Republican colleagues to talk about energy and climate and what works in their respective states. Senator Curtis's leadership in Congress has since helped bridge the gap between Republicans on Capitol Hill in the energy space. During negotiations for the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, he was steadfast in his support for an all-of-the-above energy approach and led with conviction and principle. From the House and now to the Senate, we're proud to have him as a friend and an ally, and we look forward to continuing our work together. Please join me in welcoming Senator Curtis to the stage. Thank you so much. We're glad you're here.
Well, we're using plenty of energy to cool this room this morning, aren't we? Good morning. I'm just really delighted to be with you, and particularly on this topic. In reflection, as I was thinking about what I wanted to share with you, I started this little journey in my mind backwards in the years, a few years, and I kind of got introduced into this when I was the mayor of Provo City. And if you haven't been to Provo, let me just tell you, you need to go to Provo. And if you haven't been mayor, you need to be mayor. It was really a really good experience. But we were a municipality. We had Provo Power, and interestingly, our mix of power was about 80% coal and about 20% hydro. And as I joined that board, and that would have been in 2010, there was a big debate about where we were. Some of our coal sources were expiring the contracts. Where was the new energy going to come from? And I cannot tell you how much time we spent exploring a new coal project as a board. And that was it. And then we started introducing very, very tiny, like 0.5% mix in its solar project. And at the time, solar was so expensive that the only reason you could justify it is just to get it a little bit into the mix, if that makes sense. And in reality, Provo Power was implementing technology that was the same as it was 100 years before I arrived there. And nothing had changed in the industry. And then I found myself in Washington, D.C., and I thought, well, if I enjoyed being mayor, of course I would enjoy being in Congress. And I was a little delusional on that. But of course, landed in an environment that, as you know, 7, 8 years ago, was just, quite frankly, very toxic on climate. Climate was a word that Republicans didn't say. You were told if you taught climate, you wouldn't get reelected. I used to have some fun conversations with my Democratic colleagues about nuclear, and I like to tease them because if you could catch them in an elevator when nobody was there, they would say, you know, we're going to need a lot of nuclear. And then today, of course, it's widely embraced. But fast forward to today, Marionette Miller-Meeks is doing a great job with the caucus. I think there's about 85 House Republicans that are really comfortable talking about climate. It's fantastic, the fact that we've been able to just somewhat normalize that's a good conversation to have. And then as I thought about that, I thought, you know, I think the greatest lesson that I have learned through this experience is what happens when we make an issue political and when we put political stakes in the ground on this. And I think very few topics, as much as climate, is a victim of that politicizing. I think immigration, right, might fall into that same category, but I think certainly climate has. And I think the message, a couple of messages that I'd like to leave with you is, number one, we who care deeply about this, and I think it's fair to say if we're here, we all care deeply about this, need to figure out how to keep the politics out of it. And tomorrow, if they let me out of the Senate, tomorrow I will be on a hike with the mayor of Alta. And we will be up in the Wasatch Mountains, which is where my father took me when I was a young boy. And that's what caught me on fire of, like, yes, we have to protect this earth, this environment, this climate. And so I've learned to ask people, instead of how do you feel about climate, I say, do you want to leave the earth better than you found it? It's a great way to take politics out of it. You know, it's interesting, deep red Utah, and I've never once found anybody who doesn't want to leave the earth better than they found it. And I think that's just a great approach. Then the other thing that I would say is I'm absolutely convinced that the forces that are forming our energy policy are much deeper and much stronger than political policy or than legislation. And I think the three things that are driving are affordability, reliability, and clean. And if you go back on that timeline a little bit, you'll see, if we're honest, that Republicans really leaned into affordability and reliability and kind of put our stake in the ground and missed the fact that the market was moving towards clean, right? Even more than government was pushing it, the market was moving towards clean. And I think if we're fair, on the other side, we leaned way into clean and abandoned affordability and reliability. And I think there's no better example of that than in Europe. I happen to be it's kind of an interesting story. The European Union invited the Conservative Climate Caucus to Europe to show us how good they were on climate. So I went with a couple of my colleagues that were part of the caucus, and the first day or two, we got this lecture from Europe about how smart they were. Monday, while we were there, Russia invaded Ukraine. Excuse me, it was Wednesday. We landed Monday, Russia invaded Ukraine on Wednesday, and all of a sudden, this glibness that they had clean figured out was erased, and they were buying dirty fossil fuel from an enemy, right? Because they had abandoned affordability and reliability and only worried about clean. And I think that one of the lessons I've learned is, like, no matter where we legislate, no matter what we do, the market is driving these three forces, and we can't forget any one of those forces. If you just totally lean into clean, and we leave people paying utility bills that are just simply not affordable, they don't care about clean at that point. So I really think that taking politics out of it, focusing on what really matters, affordability, reliability, and clean, we'll actually be able to accomplish our goals, which I know at times feel like they're very far away. And the last point that I'd bring up is that world that I came from in 2010, where we were 80% coal and 20% hydro, has now shifted so dramatically and so quickly that it's hard to even comprehend. And the reality of it is we're now in a world where we need every electron we can get. And we're not quite sure where we're going to get all of our electrons, right? And where they're going to come from. And that was one of the reasons it was real easy for me to lean in on the big, beautiful bill on the energy credits. It's like, guys, like, we are going to need this source of energy. And what's really evident to me is if we don't, and if we fail as a nation, two things will happen. One is it will go overseas. And the second thing is our consumers here at home will be hit with very large utility bills. Neither of those things are things that we want to have happen. So let me just quickly say thank you to all of you who engage on this. I know it can be a frustrating, sometimes seeming like the target is far away, but I'm an optimistic guy. I'm actually really pleased where we're headed, and I think the great people that have put this together, thanks for supporting this week, and thanks for letting me be part of this with you.